Hey, this is Kels Not Chels Not Live. I am Kelsey Macke, and this is the Revise Along Challenge. Hey guys, thank you so much for coming back to my channel. I'm super excited today. I'm going to talk you through phase 1 of the Revise Along Challenge. So this was born out of some conversations that were happening in my DMs over on Instagram. My name on Instagram is @KelsNotChels. I hope that you will come and find me over there. But we were discussing revising and how solitary this process is and how lonely this process can make you feel. And I was talking about how I think that if we could do it together, we would find that it feels so nice to have people who are also in the same process as you. It's going to be difficult to create a sense of community when we're all working on different projects. We all have different skill sets. We're all working from a different starting point. So what I wanted to create here is a challenge that can make us feel like we're connected and that we're doing some of the same steps, even though all of our projects and processes will be slightly different. So the Revise Along Challenge is a photo challenge just like any other on Instagram, where you make a post daily or every other day on your account based on a prompt from me. There's a challenge card for phase 1 that has a list of words on it. You can choose to use that list of words as like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 inspiration words, or you can just choose randomly. I've always been a big fan of Instagram challenges that allow you some flexibility. So in this phase 1 challenge card, you'll find 12 words, and those 12 words are all based on things that I do in the first phase of revising. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through those 12 words, which is essentially talking you through my first steps when I'm revising a new project. So a couple of disclaimers before we get started. First, your process will not match mine exactly. Second, you have to give yourself some grace. You might find as you start through this process that I'm talking about some things that you're not ready to do, either because you haven't already taken the pre-steps, the prerequisite steps, or because you don't know how. So if you come across some part of this that you don't understand, please do leave a comment below and I will help you if there's any way that I can. I promise I will. So just to get you guys all on the same page, on my Instagram feed, you will find in my story highlights a link to all of the posts and each of the phases. The first phase is going live this week, and the subsequent phases, there are 4 phases, will go live one after the other for the next 4 weeks. Now, that does not mean that this process is a 4-week-long process. You might be in revisions for months, but as you move through the phases, you'll know when it's time to move on to the next step. I think of these sometimes as passes. They are breeze-throughs. Every time I read through the book, I'm looking for some different things. But the first step is going to be this first phase, this first initial phase after a break. I do recommend that you make sure you have a break before you start phase 1. If you just finished drafting in November and you took all of the month of December off, then probably it's a good enough time for you to come back. If you can wait even longer, then you probably should. The more distance you can get between you and your book, the more likely you are to read it as a reader when you come back to it this first time. And that is your goal. You want to read it like a reader so that you'll notice all the things that you messed up on. Which plot threads did you drop? Which gaps in logic did you make? Which leaps did you take that the reader doesn't understand? What promises did you make that you did not come through on? What clues did you drop that you didn't ever fulfill the other end of? So there are going to be things that you'll only notice if you can approach your book as a reader. So that's why the gap is important. But when you come back to your book for that first time back, this is how I get started with the process. Now in the phase 1 card, I have purposefully scrambled the words a little bit, so I'm going to unscramble them in this video and talk you through what they mean to me and how they come into play with my first phase of revising. So the first things that I want to look at are my mission, my theme, and my purpose. So before I start writing a project, I like to think about those 3 words in context of the story I want to tell. What is the purpose of this story? What is the mission? What is the theme? What are the things that I want to say in this book, in this novel? What are the things that I want my reader to go away with, that I want to linger in their mind when they think back on my writing? So mission, theme, and purpose are words that are meant to trigger in you when you're working on the Instagram challenge, the connection to the core of your work. So you might take a picture of anything and in the caption talk about your purpose or your theme or your mission. You might find that there are certain symbols that you have, maybe items on like an inspiration board like I have back here. Maybe there are small objects, maybe there are quotes that are sort of those like key, like heartfelt touchstone moments. So the first thing that I do is revisit my purpose and what I hope to accomplish. The next thing that I do is go back to my query. So I've said 100 times, but Annie Neugebauer is my critique partner and she is absolutely brilliant. She has a post about how to build your query or your pitch. And I will never again write a novel without writing my pitch first. Knowing my pitch and having my query written has been one of the most amazing things when it comes to my ability to write a clear draft and really know what I'm doing before I sit down and put my fingers on the keys. Now, I know there's a chance that some of you are pantsers. I wish you all the best. But as someone who wants to have a plan of action before I begin, writing the query letter was hugely transformative to me. I will put a link in the comments to several of Annie's resources that will be helpful for you if you have not yet written a query. If you have not written a query, before you begin revising, I highly recommend that you do. You should know what you think your story is going to accomplish before you start revising. You should be sure that you already have an expectation in your mind of what is the tone going to be like, which you would also include in your query. Who is the main character? What is their motivation? What is their goal? What are the obstacles standing in their way? And what are the stakes if they do not come through and they do not fulfill the other end of if they do not accomplish the goal that they set out to accomplish? So when you're putting together your query, you need to make sure that you have all of those pieces and that you understand how those pieces are supposed to fit together. So if you're not sure about how that works, again, I'll link some resources down below. But that brings us to the next few words on the challenge card. Obstacles. What is the thing that's standing in your main character's way? What's keeping them from accomplishing their goal? Motivation. What motivates your character to keep going and to push through and to go on this journey? And stakes. That means there has to be something that will be irreversibly broken if this does not go according to plan. So you have to make sure in a novel that your stakes are high. Sometimes stakes are individual and sometimes they're universal. That sort of depends on what you're writing. But it is important that even if your stakes are personal, that the stakes are high, that it matters if they accomplish their goals or not. If their life's the same, whether they accomplish their goals or not, then you haven't set up a good enough goal and you haven't made sure that your obstacles are big and bad enough. So those are some other words on this challenge card. Impressions. So now that I've read my query and I know what I expected my book to do and I've revisited my theme and my mission and my purpose, it's time to start reading my book. So I like to print a copy of my book on paper and make sure that I have physical pages. And the reason that helps me is because, first of all, I think that I notice things in a very different way when I'm looking at paper than when I'm looking at a screen. If I wrote something on my computer screen, when I'm looking at it in the screen, there are parts of my brain that think that they've done things that they maybe haven't done. But when you're looking at it in a new medium, so for me, when I'm looking at it on paper, it's a brand new experience. And my brain is going to pick up on things that it didn't notice when it was in the form of its initial creation. So I like to print that out. If you do not have access to a printer or do not have the resources to print an entire manuscript, then your next best bet is going to be to put it in a PDF or an otherwise uneditable document that you can read on your phone or on your tablet. The point of this part of the process is that you can't fiddle with it as you go. This first read through is supposed to be you being a reader. If you sat down with this book, what would be your experience? When would you get bored? When would you be willing to set down the book? When would you be like, I can't quit turning the pages? It's important for you to understand that if you get tangled up in chapter 1 or chapter 2, 10 pages in, 20 pages in, making little notes, making little adjustments, because spoiler alert, when you read through this, you will find line after line after line after line that you want to change. That's great. You'll get there, but not on this first read through. I do occasionally read with a highlighter or maybe with some Post-its to notate a couple things that I want to make sure I don't forget. Making some small notes in the side is fine, but you're not going to be able to fix everything in one go anyway. And really, this is the most common way to approach revisions, is to start large and then focus in small as you go. So this first read through is really going to be about big picture items, and it's really important that you don't get bogged down in the minutia, in the small details. So once my project is printed, and it is, I have just printed my manuscript and I'm about ready to start this process, I will begin reading. And again, other than maybe sticking a Post-it flag or making a highlight, I'm really not going to be doing much other than reading during this first time through. As I read, I'm going to be thinking about the things that are on this card. I'm going to be thinking about the impressions, the overall impressions that I'm giving to the reader, and I'm also going to think about the promises that I'm making. Early in the book, you're probably making promises to your reader about what things will be resolved by the end, and it is important for you to keep track of those promises so that you can be sure that you came through on them and that you fulfilled your end of the bargain. One of the primary ways to make sure that your reader leaves your book satisfied is to make sure that you always keep your promises. It's sort of like the Chekhov's gun analogy. If you put something on the mantle that's a loaded gun, you have to make sure that that gun is used at some point in the story, because you've made a commitment to your reader that at some point that's going to come into play. So even if you're not talking about a loaded gun in your novel, you've probably made some promises in those early chapters, especially if you wrote those early chapters a long time ago, of things you thought you wanted to do and places you wanted them to go and feelings you wanted them to explore. And sometimes when we're writing, we forget about those things. So going through the book and making sure that you kept your promises is a really important step. So that is phase one. I'm just going to get through that initial read through. I'm looking for big picture items. I'm making sure that my character has clear motivations and that they have very clear goals. I'm making sure that my character has a reason to be pushing through, and I'm making sure that there are big stakes at risk if they do not have success. I'm making sure that my mission statement is coming through and that my purpose is being fulfilled. And I'm also making sure that I have a really strong query that has already mapped out exactly what I hope this story will accomplish. So that is phase one of my Revise Along challenge. I hope that you will join me. If you have a novel that you've recently finished drafting, this process is going to be a great tool for you because I'm breaking it down step by step. So all we're doing in phase one is reading our book like readers. That is so, so important. Thank you guys so much for watching this phase one video. I hope I've kept it short enough for you. I will be back next week with the phase two video talking about what I'm gonna do after that initial read through, because it's daunting. You'll probably find so many things that you want to change after that first read through, but don't worry, we'll get past it together. We'll get through these revision trenches together, I promise. Please leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of this process. Maybe if you have a question about how this is supposed to play out, you can ask that in the comments too. And other than that, I'll see you guys around here next week. Thanks so much. Bye.